The wagon lurched to a stop in front of the Hardin Creek General Store, and the driver did not climb down to help her. He sat with his hands on the reins and stared straight ahead while Mara Sutton descended on her own. 4 flour sacks tied across her back, a wooden box braced against her chest, and 6 children coming down after her in a line like ducks off a log. The smallest one, a girl of not quite 3, slid the last 2 feet and landed in the dust and did not cry. The town watched from its doorways. Not one person moved. Mara set the wooden box on the ground, put the smallest child on top of it, and turned back to count the others. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She looked at the driver. He had already released the brake. If this story has already found a corner of your heart, if you believe that a woman who keeps counting is a woman worth counting on, please subscribe to this channel right now and ring that notification bell. Drop the name of your city or town in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. Now, come back with me to Hardin Creek, Wyoming, in the autumn of 1882, where a woman with 6 children and no husband is about to walk into a hardware store and ask for work she was not advertised for, from a man who was not expecting her. Her name was Mara Sutton, formerly Mara Cole, and she had been a widow for 11 months and 14 days. The grief had not softened with time the way people told her it would. It had simply changed shape, less like a wound now, more like a stone she carried, heavy enough to know it was there, not heavy enough to stop her from moving. James Sutton had died of a lung infection in the 3rd week of February, 8 days after the youngest was born, and the farm in Nebraska had gone to his brother inside of a month. She had not fought it. There had been nothing left to fight with. She had a cousin in Wyoming, or had had one. The letter she sent 3 weeks ago had come back unopened, the forwarding address scratched out. What she had, besides the children, was $41 and a notice torn from a Cheyenne newspaper. Crumpled now from being read so many times the fold lines had gone soft. Hardin Creek Hardware, seeking kitchen help and general domestic for bachelor household. Room and board provided. Inquiry at the store. No name, no wage stated. She had read it 11 times on the train and once more on the wagon, and she had decided each time that it was enough to try. The stagecoach driver who had taken their fare from the train depot had said 3 things to her. He had said the town was small and unfriendly to newcomers. He had said the man who owned the hardware concern was named Caleb Dunmore, that he was 37 years old and had not spoken more than 12 words at a stretch to anyone in Hardin Creek in the 2 years since he arrived, and that in those 2 years exactly no one had ever seen him smile. He had said this last thing while looking at her 6 children, and the implication had been clear enough without stating it. She had said, "Thank you," and meant none of it as warmth. The town's eyes followed her down the main street in that particular way she knew, the long traveling measurement, starting at the top and moving down with the kind of deliberate attention that was not admiration. She was not a small woman. She had never been a small woman. She had been broad across the shoulders since her 13th year, and broad everywhere else since her 2nd child, and 11 months of grief had not changed that. She heard the comment from somewhere near the post office. 2 women's voices, the specific tone of people who have never had to work very hard to be looked at, and she did not stop walking. She had learned a long time ago that stopping gave them the satisfaction of watching her process it. Her children walked behind her in a line and said nothing, because her children had learned this too. She pushed open the door of the hardware store. The man behind the counter was fitting a hinge onto a cabinet door. He did not look up. The store was deep and well organized. Nails sorted by size in their bins, rope coiled in graduated loops, the smell of iron and linseed oil and old wood. Mara set the wooden box on the nearest clear surface, unwrapped the smallest child from her back, and stood in front of the counter until he had no choice but to acknowledge her. He looked up. He was a large man, not fat, simply large, the kind of large that came from working outdoors since childhood. Dark-haired, square-jawed, with the particular stillness of a man who had decided long ago not to waste himself on unnecessary motion. His eyes moved over her, then over the children behind her, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the smallest on the box, and then back to her face. Nothing in his expression changed. "Store's open," he said. "I'm not here to buy," Mara said. "I'm here about the kitchen position, the notice in the Cheyenne paper." He set the hinge down. "That notice went in 6 weeks ago. I know it. Position's still open," he said. It was not enthusiasm. It was simple fact. "Room and board was mentioned," she said. "The wage wasn't. $40 a month." He looked at the children again. The oldest, Thomas, 13, stood with his arms crossed and his chin up in the way he had taken to doing since his father died. A posture that was trying very hard to be a man and nearly getting there. "That would be for you, not for them. They work," Mara said. "Thomas and Eli are experienced with livestock and general repair. Pearl and Lily are competent in the kitchen, and they follow instruction without repeating. Samuel is 9 and can carry, haul, and chop small wood. Rose is not quite 3 and will stay out from underfoot." He was quiet for a long moment, not uncertain, just quiet. There was a difference. "I don't have children here," he said finally. "You didn't advertise for them," Mara said. "I'm advertising them now. You can decide." He looked at the hinge in his hand. He set it down again, this time more deliberately, the way a man sets something down when he is done with one thing and moving to the next. "Kitchen's through the back," he said. "Living quarters above. There's one room." "One room is fine. I'm not a sociable man." "I didn't come here for society," Mara said. "I came here for work." He nodded once. That was all. The kitchen was worse than she had imagined, and she had imagined it honestly. The stove had not been properly cleaned since before his arrival. The cast iron was layered with the carbon testimony of 100 hasty, solitary meals. The flour barrel was half full and damp along the inside walls. The root cellar door had warped off its lower hinge and let in cold air that had turned a crate of stored carrots to soft, suggestive shapes. The window above the basin let in good light, which was the one thing she could say for it. She stood in the middle of it for a moment, with her hands at her sides, taking it in the way she took in most things that needed doing, not with dismay, but with the quiet accounting of a woman calculating what was possible before deciding to do it anyway. Thomas appeared at her elbow. "Mama, I see it," she said. "Put your brothers and sisters upstairs. Don't touch anything until I've had a look at what's up there. Then come back down, and we'll start with the stove." He went. She rolled up her sleeves. Caleb Dunmore did not reappear for 3 hours, which was exactly the amount of time she needed. When he pushed open the back door of the store and stepped into the kitchen, the stove had been blacked and scrubbed, the barrel emptied and dried and refilled from the sack she had brought, and the smell of lard biscuits, real ones, with butter worked into the flour in layers she had done by feel and muscle memory, was coming from the oven in waves that were almost aggressive in their warmth. He stopped in the doorway. Rose was on the floor with a tin cup and a wooden spoon, conducting her own experiment. Lily, who was 7, was standing on a stool at the basin, washing the dishes Mara had already finished using. Thomas and Eli were nowhere in evidence. She had sent them to look at the roof of the outbuilding, which she had noticed from the upstairs window, listed in a way that meant water getting in before snow fell. "I haven't said you could use my stores," Caleb said. I made note of what I used, Mara said. She had written it on a scrap of paper she handed to him now, without looking up from the biscuits she was turning out. I'll account for it in the first week's wage. Or you can count it separate. Either way. He read the list. He folded it. He put it in his shirt pocket. You're not what I was expecting, he said. No, Mara said. I don't expect I am. He picked up a biscuit from the pan without asking. She did not comment on this. He ate it standing in the doorway, and she watched, without appearing to watch, the way his face changed, not dramatically, not a smile, nothing so legible as that. Just a small release of something around the jaw. The way a man's face goes when his body receives something it has been quietly asking for, and finally gets it. He left without another word. That was enough. The days settled into shape. She learned his hours, early to the store, late from it, a hard worker in the way of men who used work as a barrier between themselves and whatever they preferred not to think about. She cooked breakfast before he came down and left it covered. She cooked supper and had it on the table at 6. She did not attempt conversation. She did not require it. When Thomas fixed the outbuilding roof on the 3rd day using lumber from the hardware store's scrap pile, she told her son to leave a note with the board count on the counter. Caleb left a note back the next morning. Don't pay for it. Consider it use of materials. C. D. She found the photograph on the 5th day. She was not snooping. She was cleaning the room he used as a small office off the back of the store. A room he had not specifically told her to clean, and not specifically told her not to, and she was moving a stack of ledgers when the photograph slid out from between them and landed face up on the floor. A woman, young, slight, with a formal expression of someone sitting very still for a long time, and a small boy, perhaps 4 years old, both of them in their best clothes. The woman was smiling slightly with one corner of her mouth, the private smile of someone amused by something just outside the frame. On the back, in handwriting that was not Caleb's, 4 words, always yours, always waiting. She put it back between the ledgers exactly where it had been and did not speak of it. That evening, after supper, she was at the basin when she heard him come in. He stood at the kitchen doorway longer than was usual, and she did not turn around. You cleaned the office, he said. I moved the ledgers to dust behind them, she said. I put everything back where it was. Silence, then she died in the spring, 3 years ago. Fever took the boy first, then her, inside of a week. He said it the way a man recites something he has had to say enough times that he has learned to keep his voice flat while saying it. I came out here after. There wasn't a reason to stay where I was. She turned around then. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the window above her shoulder. I'm sorry, she said. He nodded once. It was the same nod he had given her in the store on the first day, and she understood now what it meant. It meant he had received what she said, and he was not going to drop it or dismiss it. And he was done talking about it. She turned back to the basin. He stayed at the table 5 minutes longer than he had any night before. The trouble arrived on the 14th day in the form of a man named Gerald Bull, who was Hardin Creek's justice of the peace and also, by general understanding, the man who had been interested in acquiring the building that housed the hardware store for the better part of 18 months. He came in on a Wednesday morning, while Mara was sweeping the front steps, and looked her over with the calibrated contempt of a man who dealt primarily in surfaces. Dunmore's housekeeper, he said, not a question. His cook, Mara said. 6 children, Bowley said, looking at Thomas and Eli, who were restacking lumber along the side of the building. 6 children, and no husband. That's irregular, isn't it? Again, not a question. I'm a widow, Mara said. That's one word for it, Bowley said. He went into the store without looking back. She did not know then what he had said to Caleb inside, but she knew what it was by the look on Caleb's face when he came through the kitchen at noon. A flatness that was different from his ordinary flatness, stiffer, worked at. "Bowley wants the building," he said, without preamble. "He's been pursuing it since before I arrived. He's got it in his mind that if he can make the situation here look irregular, he can force the issue with the bank. There's a clause in the lease about conduct becoming to the community." His voice was even. "He'll bring it formally within the week, most likely." "I thought you should know." "What does that mean for us?" Mara said. "Nothing I intend to let stand," he said. She looked at him. He was not a man who said things he did not intend to back up. She had established this much in 14 days. "All right," she said. She spent that afternoon writing. She wrote to the Nebraska County Recorder for a copy of James Sutton's death certificate, for the record of her marriage, for the deed transfer that had taken the farm. 3 letters, each precise, each calm, each requesting only the facts. She wrote to the Cheyenne newspaper for a copy of the original advertisement. She wrote a 4th letter to a pastor in Lincoln whose character she had kept. She sealed all 4 letters and gave them to Thomas to take to the post. That night, Rose woke crying from a dream, and it was Caleb who appeared at the top of the stairs first, before Mara had gotten her boots on. She heard him through the door, his voice very quiet, saying nothing consequential, just sound. The low murmur of a man who remembered what to do with a small frightened child, even though it had been a long time since he'd had to do it. She stood in the hallway and did not go in. Rose quieted within 2 minutes. Mara went back to bed and lay in the dark for a while, thinking about the photograph between the ledgers, and the woman in it with the private smile, and the way certain griefs do not so much leave as become part of the floor you stand on. Always there, walked on daily, firm enough to hold. The snow came early that year. It came on a Thursday, before the letters she had written had time to come back, and it came hard. A full Wyoming blizzard that pressed white against every window in the building by nightfall and made the street outside invisible by 8 o'clock. She fed the children supper, put Rose to bed, settled the older ones with what reading material existed in the building. 2 almanacs and a ledger she let them use the back pages of for their own purposes, and came back downstairs to find Caleb at the kitchen table, with the lamp turned low, not working, just sitting. She put the kettle on without asking. "The receipts Bowley will produce," she said, "will show the advertisement was placed 6 weeks before I answered it. He'll argue I came under false pretense, or that the position was not legitimately offered. I have the original clipping. I want you to know I have it." "I know you have it," he said. "I've seen how you keep your papers." She sat down across from him. Outside, the wind was doing something theatrical to the roof. "I'm not going to apologize for the children," she said. "I didn't ask you to. People will ask you to. People will say the situation is irregular, or improper, or beneath your standing in this community, which is not much of a standing to begin with, given you've been here 2 years and have made no friends." She said it without unkindness. It was simply true. He looked at her for the first time in the conversation. "You haven't either. I've been here 2 weeks," she said. Something happened then at the corners of his mouth. It was not a full smile. It was the first movement toward one, the smallest possible advance in that direction. The thing that happened on a man's face when he had forgotten for a moment to keep his expression arranged. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds. It was the first time she had seen it. She looked away first, because it seemed like the right thing to do, to not stare at a man discovering he still had a face capable of that. She poured the tea and pushed his cup toward him, and neither of them said anything for a while. And the wind kept performing against the roof, and the lamp held steady, and that was all. The letters came back in 9 days. Caleb had said a week, and he was right. Gerald Bowl filed his formal complaint on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, word had gone around Hardin Creek the way word always went around small towns, which was to say everywhere immediately, and with a great deal of embellishment. Mara heard the version that reached her from Pearl, who had heard it from the merchant's daughter, and she noted the embellishments with a flat calm that her daughter found unnerving. "Mama," Pearl said, "aren't you frightened?" "Not today," Mara said. The hearing was set for Thursday, in front of Bowl himself, which was an arrangement that suited Bowl considerably. The room was the back of the post office, and it held, by the time Thursday arrived, more of Hardin Creek than strictly needed to be there, which was all right. Witnesses were what she had come for. Bowl read his complaint with the enjoyment of a man who believed he had already won. Irregular household. No record of marriage. Children of uncertain provenance. A woman of, he paused here and managed to make the pause expressive considerable presence and uncertain reputation. A situation unbecoming to a commercial establishment, and a lease held to community standards. He had not gotten to the second page when Caleb Dunmore stood up. He did not clear his throat. He did not wait to be acknowledged. He stood up, and the room went quiet the way rooms go quiet, when a large, still man who is not given to speaking suddenly does. "Those children," he said, "are the children of a widow who answered a legitimate advertisement, traveled 6 days from Nebraska, and has kept my kitchen, my accounts, my building, and my outbuilding in better order than they have been in 2 years. His voice was even, not loud. Even, Thomas Sutton repaired the east outbuilding roof in 2 afternoons with scrap lumber and his own judgment, and has not asked me once for anything beyond what we agreed. I've watched this woman work before I was awake and after I was asleep, and I have not once had cause to question her conduct." He looked at Bowley directly. "I have cause to question yours." He sat back down. The room did not exactly erupt. What it did was stir, the particular stirring of people who have made up their minds about something and are now quietly revising. Mara did not look around at them. She looked at the table in front of her, at her own hands, broad, steady hands that had kneaded bread dough and held small children and driven teams and written careful letters. Hands that had done, she thought, most of what was required without needing to be congratulated for it. She set the letters on the table. Birth records, marriage certificate, death certificate, the pastor's character reference, the original advertisement clipping. Bowl looked at them for a long time. He did not pursue it further. The winters settled in properly after that. There was no ceremony about any of it. No declaration of changed terms, no conversation where they acknowledged what had shifted. But things shifted. Caleb left the lamp on longer in the evenings. He began to speak at meals, not much, and never about anything consequential, but enough that Thomas and Eli started waiting for it, started having things to say back. He taught Eli the name of every tool in the store and the use of each one, which took 11 days, and which Eli received with a seriousness that made Mara's chest ache quietly. On a Sunday in December, Pearl left wildflowers, dried ones, the last of the autumn, which she had pressed between 2 boards and tied with a piece of string, on the counter of the store with a note that said only thank you for letting us stay. Mara did not know about this until Caleb appeared in the kitchen doorway that evening, holding the flowers with the particular careful expression of a man handling something he is afraid to damage. "Your daughter left these for me," he said. "I know," Mara said. She did not know, but she was fairly confident Pearl had done it, and she was not going to complicate the moment. He put them on the windowsill above the basin, where they stayed. On a Tuesday in January, he came in from the cold with 2 extra bundles of firewood that he stacked by her door, without asking if she needed them. On a Wednesday, the following week, he sat down in the kitchen while she was making bread, not for any particular reason, simply sat down and watched her work the dough with his hands folded on the table and his face doing the thing it was starting to do more often. That slight forward lean of a man who is paying attention to something in a way he did not expect to find himself paying attention. "I've been writing to my brother," he said, "in Pennsylvania. I haven't written him in 3 years. She kept working the dough." "How was that?" "Strange," he said. Then, not strange. She turned the dough and pressed it down. Outside, snow was coming again, quieter this time, the kind that fell without wind and settled instead of swirling. "That's how most things are," she said, "if you give them long enough." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'd like you to stay." Not as hired help. Another pause. Not long, but deliberate. "I'd like you and the children to stay." She looked at him then. He was looking at the table, not at her, and his jaw was set in the way it set, when he had said something at the full cost of his courage and was not going to take it back, but was also not going to pretend it had been easy. She thought of the photograph between the ledgers. She thought of the woman with the private smile. She thought about floors, what they were made of, what you built on top of them. "I'd like that too," she said. She turned back to the bread. He stayed at the table. In the spring, when the mud came up through the snow and the whole valley smelled like water and turned earth, Thomas nailed a small sign above the kitchen door. He had carved it himself from a piece of poplar, and it said, simply, "Sutton Dunmore," and then stood back and looked at it with the expression of a boy who has done a thing he intends to stand behind. Caleb came in from the store, saw it, and said nothing for a long moment. Then he put his hand briefly on Thomas's shoulder and went back to work. Mara saw this from the window above the basin. She had learned a long time ago not to ask for more than what was in front of her. What was in front of her now was a kitchen that was clean and warm and full of the smell of bread, and 6 children who had learned to say Mr. Dunmore, and then, by increment, something shorter and closer, and a man who had stopped being afraid to use his face. She had come to Hardin Creek with $41 and a crumpled newspaper notice in the absolute certainty that she was not going to stop moving, and what she had found was not what she had been looking for, because she had not let herself look for it. But it was here. All of it was here. She did it the way she did everything, with both hands, her whole self taking up every inch of the life she had earned, and not 1 square foot of apology for any of it.